Blog Talk Radio.
There's been an awakening. Have you felt it? You are listening to Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie.
Trying to get the system going because the Rich Report seems to be doing pretty good. Newman Kare seems to be having no problems with it. So I'm going to try again to see whether or not if I can get back to some good stuff. So dealing with this format until another format becomes available. As we know, Google is taking off their Google Plus. So that limiting a lot of things that people can be able to do over social media. Google Plus was really actually turning into a very good platform. I know that African Americans were using that platform. Even Phoenix Move was using the platform. It's a lot of people, and between that and using YouTube, everything seems to be going pretty good. So it was really, really good. So yeah, nice, but this one here with with Blog Talk, it's a touch and go situation. I even seen the Rich Report every once in a while has a problem with it, but you seem to be trying to get it going. So this is a show that I want to do for a little while, and that is the reaching out to read the full text of the American nations and our outlines the general history of the ancient modern world, including the whole history of the earth and mankind in the Western Hemisphere, the philosophy of American history, the annals, traditions, civilization, languages, etc., all of the American nation, tribes, and empires and states. And the book is called The American Nations, or Outlines of a National History of the Ancient and Modern Nations of North and South America. And this book is written by the Professor C.S. Rafinescu. And he is a very, very, very important person in terms of this whole entire thing, because with his information, what he did, he went and he took all the geology reports, archaeology reports, all the historical reports from many, many, many different books. And so even in the first part of his own book, the first few pages are dedicated to thank people who have, put together all this information. And one of the reasons why he did this book was so that in principle, he can put the history all in one place so that it could be chronicled, and people will be able to see the truth of it, right? So it's very interesting when you talk about this book, including the whole history of the earth and mankind in the Western Hemisphere, the philosophy and American history, the annals, traditions, civilizations, languages, all of the American nations, tribes, empires, and states. And he gets down to it. And I think in this book he does a fairly good job in terms of looking out and putting all of the information together. One of the things he says is we all have, Heather learnt, respecting the ancient state of the natives of the new continent is nothing in comparison to the light that will be thrown on the subject. If we succeed in bringing together the materials now scattered over the worlds that have survived the ages of ignorance and barbarism. And, that word barbarism is extremely, because that's exactly what they do. They go around and they destroy everything. Just like after wars in Europe, they destroyed almost 95 to 98% of the history over there. A lot of the history over there is whitewashed. As I say, whitewash means painted over the dark-skinned figures with white skin. And probably it's, some of them are probably in the annals of the Vatican, right? So it's really, really, really important work. And one of the things he says, to the Society of Paris, to you I dedicate this work, result of long and weary research. This homage is due to the public aberration you give to the Ray First Analogues labor, Ray memorized, or series of research on the augue of mankind, which I endeavor to trace philosophically to the center of Asia. This is his thing, right? I had announced long ago this history of America, the inhabitants of the whole hemisphere. I had quoted it in my other works. I now offer the outlines of it under your auspices. So he took his work over there, and they took a look at it and looked at all of his work, and they came up with a lot of the work that he's writing in this book. He goes on to say that you have furnished the example of cultivation along with geography, all of the auxiliary and connected science which may enlighten it, particularly the ancient and modern ethology and philosophic one of its bases. You will see that I have followed this practice in availing myself to all of the science to enlighten the history of mankind. The etymology of annals of nations above all philosophy with chronology and geography, and the origins of the annals of the black nations and the American nations were two subjects quite obscure and neglected, or least known of the history of mankind. Nobody here has undertaken as yet the history of the Negro nations, a labor so difficult and luckless as to be despised. My memoirs on the dispense race, they call it a dispensed race, meaning that they totally just written them off. They didn't expect us to still be here, or expect the indigenous people, the carbon-based, copper-colored people, to be here anymore, right? They call it a dispense race. May perhaps furnish the basis of such history. All the histories of America are more fragments or dreams. I have perceived possibility and necessity to write a general and faithful history of the hemisphere. I now offer the results of my weary labor. So this book is a combination of all of the things that he was writing, all of the things that he was putting together, and very interesting when he gets down to it. I mean, he dedicates the book to a lot of his friends, and in the preference, he says, in a venturing to open a new path in his historical research on the earth and mankind, it is incumbent on the bold pioneer to state his views, or at least on furnishing adequate reasons for delivering so far from the usual track. And he's explaining to you that because they had basically written off, covered up, and completely just obliterated the so-called black nations, Negro nations, whatever, that he's putting things back on track, right? He's really putting things back on track. And it's so far off because the only thing that they actually came out of it in the 1800s was that the Native Americans were the Mongolians, and they were the only ones here. Well, every science and branch of knowledge is improving and has, with rapid strides, made continual advances for 50 years past or more. Remember, this book was done in the late 1700s. Is the noble muse of the history kept stationary forever? In other words, what he's talking about is that they were setting the history of this whole entire history of North America and South America, and etching it in stone. So this book was done October 22nd, 1833. So it was pretty old work, right? But he also had a lot of time to be able to research all the things that came before him, right? History kept stationary by compilers and classical potlers, and far America by foes of the ancient and modern nations of a whole hemisphere. No, time to improve history as everything else, to seek the truth and tell it. So what he's trying to do in this book, he's trying to actually bring together all the information out and in a logically scientific way prove the facts that were actually written and ignored, disregarded by the Jesuits of the Catholic Church, by the kings and queenships of Europe, and a lot of other nations all around the earth, hiding the history from humans, from mankind. As the human mind is set, swayed by authorities, and this is what he's talking about, by authorities, then genius or wisdom, meaning that, the authorities who don't know anything, who haven't really studied it, took a look at the information and decided it should be something else. High authorities will be given instead of long explanations. I mean, he's going to get straight to the point. Ever since the time of the Juvenal, it has been an ungrateful task to write historical truth. Wow. Often prefer to be amused, deceived, or helped in strife. Does that sound like modern day today? Than to be instructed or received sketches of former times. Yet there is always a script delight in reviewing faithful pictures of age past, or for our ancestors on earth and the predecessors on all soils of our homes, or where we spend the scenes of our lives. This worthless, who has been taken for models and guides, is in the undertaking of Solomon, Moses, Job, St. Paul, St. Augustine, Plato, Newbeer, Humboldt, and Malcolm, Veblen, Dioff, Bryant, Ogden, Drummond, Picard, Chaplin. So he's naming all of the things that he has in the words, and he said they speak for themselves in quotations of their own words instead of elaborating reflections. He's letting the work speak for itself. So basically what you're going to be hearing over the next couple of readings of this book is an actual depiction of what people saw, what they studied, and what they knew when they came over here instead of looking at everything. And it is a revelation indeed that this whole entire book was actually written and made affordable or made allowed for us to be able to see that. Things like these kinds of books and stuff like that, they're usually in the schools of the elite, right? So, you know, the Ivy League colleges and all that other type stuff. And so in exceeding the modern nations of North and South America. And let's recall the memory. We're going to be reading out of this over the next couple of shows. And it's going to be very, very, very important. And then he says, when I laid the foundations of the earth, the morning star sung together, and the sons of God shouted for joy. Speech or God himself in Job. And he starts quoting all of these philosophies, like the Hebrew philosophy divided the world into two hemispheres. The upper was Shem or Shaham, the heavens. The lower was Sol or Sheloh, Tath, or inferior, was the place of the bad souls and Rephaim. The true soul was America and the southern hemisphere. The Jesuits, Semites, thought that Job had spoken of America. Peter's dissertations on Job. So, again, like, Blog Talk is, like, really crazy. So it just disconnected me off, had to call back in. And this is one of the reasons why I really don't use this show too much, because it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. And you have to really pay attention to all the stuff that's going on. So it just disconnected me for whatever reason. I have no idea. First of all, it wouldn't let me dial in directly. It wouldn't let me use Skype. So I have to use my phone to call in. I can't use my microphone. So I don't even know what the hell this thing's going to sound like when you guys actually hear it for the first time. And so if you're listening to it live, which some people are, it's a shame because you get so many disruptions as it's going on. For the YouTube listeners, we'll be able to cut out a lot of the dead spots and make it sound like it's actually a flowing show. But I just wanted to put that in there just to make sure that you have an understanding of what we're talking about. So where we left off was that the Hebrews philosophy separated the world into two aspects, right? One higher, one lower. And so now at this particular time, you have to remember that the Hebrews are actually taken over by the Hishop people, right? And those were the Europeans that were from up north, right? That the ones that ultimately landed in Germany and Russia, and then ultimately in Jerusalem, right, with their state in Jerusalem. And what they've done, interestingly enough, they've stolen the identity of the colored beings. They've stolen the identity of carbon-based beings, which were the original Hebrews, and turned it into themselves. And as soon as they began to start getting this power, what they did was they began to start separating things and putting people in lower classes. So most of the lower classes, as we see today, are at the bottom of the world. And what is the bottom of the world? We're calling that South America. We're calling that Africa. Lots of China. All of the islands in the Caribbean, right? All of the islands in the Pacific, and some of the Americas, right? So those were the lower, and then the upper were the ones with the Canada and up, basically, Europe and up, Spain and up, anywhere where there were sulfur-based beings. Sulfur-based beings being carbon-based beings and Asiatic people. So as you can see, he's pointing out the very, very, very racist view that these Hebrew philosophies, when they divided the world, and then he breaks it down and gets into what the Jesuits thought that Job had even spoken of America. It is very possible for modern learning to understand better the books of Moses, Orpheus, and those of all ancient nations that the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans commentators, because of the intellectual knowledge and language, is improving, and the ancient writers have, by their genius, approximated to us, while removed from the blind of their ages in primitive world. So it is very important for us to understand that this is really, really important what he's pointing out here, because he's saying a few things. And what he's saying is that with the destruction of Alexandria and the library and all those temples and stuff like that, a lot of the information was either lost, stolen, kept, hidden from the people. Right? And now that the layperson, the person that are out there retracing all these different steps, they're starting to recapture a lot of the information that has been lost through archaeology, through anthropology, linguistics, science, etc. And now it's very possible for the modern learning to understand better the books of Moses and all of these other books that have been written and being able to be translated. So it's very important for us to understand all of this, that because when we start really getting into this book, it begins to start shedding a lot of light onto who and what we are as beings. Not only the carbon-based beings, copper-colored people, the ebony beings, right? But also all of the beings on the face of the earth and where they come from. And so going to be ending this now, but when I come back with another show, well, there's probably be about 2 or 3 parts. We'll read through this whole entire book, 300 pages. And we'll start with the preface. And you will be, there's 5 prefaces, 4 prefaces. How many prefaces are there? Let's take a look. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Before you even get into the book, right? Chapter 1 starts with a general natural regions of America, ancient and modern nations, historical period. So we'll probably start there and recap some of these preferences stuff so we can get right into this reading and have an understanding of really what's going on. So, I'll try to start using Blog Talk a little bit more to try to get acclimated to it. It's very difficult, but I'll try to do that. I'll try to do it a little lesser interviews, 30-minute shows, whatever. And then I will publish them onto YouTube, Facebook, and also onto the website and also onto the Patreon page for Blog Talk, for Dark Matter Radio. So, we really, really do appreciate you being here. We really do appreciate you signing up. And, one of the things I'm going to get into is how we reached over 400 people on our radio show. And it's very, very special for us to be able to have that. So we thank everybody for that. But we'll have a special show for that live on the radio, on A New Thunder Enna. We might be changing the name, A New Thunder Enna. Might just be going with A New Thunder, or might just be going with Enna. We'll see what happens with that. But we'll have a few changes coming on as we're starting to increase in size and, starting to get a lot of support from a lot of people. We really do appreciate it. So, Halito, great grand rising to everybody. We really do appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here on Dark Matter Radio, which is heard in over 22 countries around the world. This is one of the reasons why it's hard to give up this format, because it is heard in 22 countries in the world. And, some of those countries are including Russia, Sweden, Britain, Germany, India, Pakistan, Australia, Canada, United States. We got places in South America, the Caribbean island, all over the globe, And we're really proud about that. And we thank you for listening and supporting. And, join, get on there, join Dark Matter Radio again, and take a look at our Patreon page, which is Dark Matter Radio, Ron McLean. And it is very, very, very beautiful. Well, you guys have a great night, and we thank you for being here. We will talk to you very, very soon.